What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Stronger TV. Kiefer Lammi here with Dan Pope, as always. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We kind of wanted to cover some of the fancy or some of the weird exercises that go into our programs lately. I think a lot of times, we put these things on social media and it doesn't always do justice to, why we're actually doing it, what populations it might be good for, or where in a program we might put it. And people just kind of get this impression that like fancy exercises are all that we do.
Yeah.
Right? So I think the two that we really wanted to cover today were going to be the Copenhagen plank, right, for adductor strength, and then the second one was going to be crawling variations.
Yeah,
all right?
good.
You want to lead Copenhagen?
Yeah, let's go ahead and go for the Copenhagen, guys. Just like Kiefer said, I think it's super important that when you're choosing exercises for your athletes, you're not just picking them because they're fancy.
Why don't you come on over to the other side?
All right, sure. Let's go for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up in a side plank position. We're going to have the top leg up on top of a bench right here, and from here, you're just going to bring the hip up in the air, bring the bottom leg up, and holding in a good plank position, shoulders on top of each other, hips stacked, body nice and straight. If we want to make this more challenging, all we have to do is creep further this way, straighten out the legs, so less of the leg is on the bench, right? Good job, Kiefer, it's very strong. And you can also creep the other way to make it easier. The other thing is you can do either an isometric hold like we just showed, or you can actually move up and down, all right? So two good exercise variations. Good, take a breather. So I wanted to try to talk a little bit about why we would actually use this exercise. So for one, it's a great adductor strength training exercise, okay? And here's the thing, the outside of the hip gets a ton of attention. So glutes is all you hear on social media, right? Glute medius, glute max, we're constantly working that. The adductor is also a very important muscle group, particularly in the bottom of a squat, but also for the health of a whole lot of different orthopedic problems, right? I see a lot of adductor strains, I see a lot of athletic pubalgia, some adductor longus tendinopathy type stuff. I see a lot of femoral acetabular impingement, and we really should be strength training that side of the hip, right? From a prevention standpoint, but also from a general health perspective for the hip. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. Right, I think you can kind of compare it to like old school bro workouts, right? Where everybody did, a ton of front side training. They do squatting, they do bench press, but they don't do any horizontal pulling to take care of the other side of their upper half, right? This is kind of the same thing where like it's super common to see people, doing clams, doing abductions, even doing hip thrusts and stuff that really train the glutes and the outside, but not much stuff that's helping train the inside of the hip that has to stabilize just as much.
Yeah, you got it. Super important in sports performance too, right? A lot of these sports are going side to side quite a bit. Basketball is huge, ice hockey is another one, and the prevalence of adductor strain injuries is very high. And this is an exercise can help to rehab if you have that problem, or it's the other thing that's going to help you to prevent those injuries in the future.
So I think as far as in a training program goes, right, this is something that we use as kind of like a filler or an accessory movement towards the end. So there will be times, maybe it's not a primary lower body training session, right? Maybe we're doing a little bit more upper body accessory or some different things. I might lace this in as an accessory movement paired with a pressing exercise or paired with a pull-up or something, right? Just as kind of a supplemental exercise that's a little bit lower stress overall, but continues to address the things that we need to work on, right? We also might put it at something like the end of a warm-up, and like a little bit of a hip strengthening series before we do some plyo stuff is a little bit of a warm up for that. Or we might just put it at the end of the workout in kind of a triage with, some outside of the hip strengthening with the adductor strengthening and maybe some anterior core work. Yeah. Right, so there are a lot of ways that you can do it. You can make it fit into wherever you want for your programs, but the important thing is understanding that, we're still doing our squatting, our deadlifting, our single leg strength training, our upper body pushing and pulling. We're doing all of these things. We're just adding this as an additional supplemental thing to the program.
Yeah, it's awesome. The other piece too, and we didn't talk about it though, but if you're in a side plank position, you're still getting a whole bunch of core work, and you're also getting shoulder stability work. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, and you're just kind of checking off a lot of boxes. If you need to hit those things in your program, you're getting some frontal plane stability in the core, as well as the hip on the inside. You're also getting a little stability work for the shoulder. So if that's something you're trying to get in your program, it's a good exercise to fulfill that.
Yeah, cool. All right, second one.
Crawling.
Crawling variations. So why don't you hop on the ground, Dan?
Okay. Here?
So, that's perfect.
All right. Yeah.
So I think that we all kind of understand at this point that our crawling variations can be a pretty good core training tool, right? Because we're forced to kind of stabilize in a good position here as we hold and as we start moving, right? But I think that the almost, more important reason that we use it in our training is as kind of a prep for your upper half for some different positions, right? So if you've got Dan set up here and you think about it, if we're gonna do a forward crawl and he's gonna translate his weight forward over his body, each time he does that, that arm that's weight bearing here is having to go into more wrist extension, right? More elbow extension, and then supporting over the shoulder in that position. So if you think about stuff like, maybe somebody that wants to prepare for a handstand, this is an awesome way to start preparing the joints for the stress they're gonna have in that position. right? If we go backwards the other way, what you'll notice is each time he goes, he's having to actively reach so that he can protract, upwardly rotate, and get into that position, right? So this is an awesome prep for somebody that might be needing to work on getting overhead for something like overhead pressing or overhead supports, right? So going different directions puts a little bit more stress on different areas, but the idea is that it's kind of like a transitional shoulder and overhead or wrist or elbow weight bearing position that allows somebody that might be hurt, that can't get all the way overhead into a position, or somebody that just needs additional training volume to build up to the stress that they need for their specific sport.
Yeah, you got it. Crawls are absolutely phenomenal, and I can't really say enough about them. Kiefer already covered a lot of this, but for people that are trying to build some conditioning for the wrists, especially if they're going to be doing a lot of handstand stuff, absolutely phenomenal. Usually when people have a lot of wrist pain and extension, and we're getting out of pain, this is one of the first exercises I progress back to get stronger in this position so you can handle the forces of handstand walking. We're moving further up the chain is the shoulder. So in terms of shoulder strengthening, when you're doing a crawl, especially if you're doing a backwards crawl, there's so much good shoulder stuff going on. All the muscles around the shoulder blade are really working intensely. The other thing that's really cool about crawl variations is usually they don't bother people's shoulders that have shoulder pain. So you have someone who has a lot of shoulder pain with pressing and they're really bummed out that they can't do anything that works their shoulder, and you do a whole bunch of crawl variations as a modification, you get a bunch of work in there and it actually feels really good.
Yeah.
The other piece we didn't mention, sorry I could go on all day with this guy.
Keep going.
But if you think about it, if I am in a kind of a push-up plank position, I'm crawling, and I'm in a good position with my neck, I get a ton of strengthening for my neck, right? The neck doesn't get a lot of love, and for people that have pain, especially athletic people that don't mind crawling around on the floor, phenomenal exercise. And the other piece is for low back pain. You're getting a lot of core work there too. So a lot of athleticism going on in the crawl, and a lot of things it can help with. So.
Right. It's just a nice way. It's partial weight bearing, right? So it's not quite as challenging as something like an overhead press or a handstand position might be for somebody, right? It's a way to transition back into those things. Okay, so in programming, I know for you, Dan, in your rehab, you might use this as like phase 1 progressions of getting back to the positions or the overhead positions or overhead pressing or stuff that they want to do, right?
Yep.
In a training program for me, I might use it again as an accessory at the end of the program, right? Just to build some more conditioning for their trunk, for their shoulders, for their wrists and their elbows, for all of that. I might put it into a warm-up as a prep before we actually do some of those overhead positions because it's a little bit of a less challenging position, but it's a good way to kind of like activate or prep the positions that we're going to be in, right? So a lot of options there, but again, we're still trying to work back to our major movements that we want to do as our final goal. This is just a supplement to help us get there.
Yeah, you got it. One example is that I'm currently doing more handstand stuff. Just I get on these kicks and I really like handstands, so I'm trying to do more of it. And one of the ways I'm trying to keep my shoulders healthy and my wrists healthy are supplementing some more crawl variations into my program. So I feel like I'm actually getting some good strength work for the wrist musculature, for the shoulder, in a way that's not quite as stressful or not quite the same specific motion as a handstand. And I think it's working pretty well because I'm not hurt, so yeah, we'll see.
And I really wanted to cover this one, guys, right? Because I think it's super important that you know, while you might think that, you know, crawls are a great conditioning tool and they're something you want to throw in at the end of the workout to get somebody sweating, get them moving fast, and, you know, might be funny to watch them do. But this is something that we actually do really, really slowly and really deliberately.
Yeah.
And we're working on really trying to refine positions that we're using here. We're not just using it as a way to get somebody's heart rate up and make them feel like they're working hard.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, just because if you think about the average person that's kind of new to fitness, right? Let's say they're like 30, 40 years old, I'm just guessing. Coming in, haven't worked out in a long period of time, you say, okay, let's go crawl on the floor. It might seem like a relatively low-level exercise to you, but think about the hands and the wrists and how much time they spend in a weight-bearing position, and it's very, very little. Plus, those joints aren't necessarily designed for that, right? We didn't evolve kind of like other animals where we're going to be walking on our hands. We evolved to stand upright. So the wrist is not always going to handle that stress too much if you throw a lot of crawling in right away, especially, like you said, in a conditioning environment.
Yeah.
So.
All right, guys. So there you have it. We covered 2 of the fancier exercises that we use in our programs. As always, if you like this episode, please comment on it. Let us know that you liked it. Subscribe to our page. Tell your friends about it. And if you want to hear more about some weird exercises that you might see on the internet, let us know.
Thank you.